The Talmud asks, why does a person sin? And the answer is, Ruach shtut nechneset bo. A spirit of foolishness enters into the person. Isn't that a strange idea? Not temptation, the Talmud says. Foolishness, meaning you've lost sight of what's real. You've lost sight of what's true. At a given moment, a foolish thought comes in, and you forget who you are, where you are, and what's at stake. If you could remember who you are, where you are, what's at stake, you would be able to hold the line, be resilient, and act according to the logos, this higher law. So this idea that there's a logos from another realm that enters into human beings. The rabbinic term for the logos, by the way, is the term memra, M-E-M-R-A. And sometimes in the Aramaic translations of the Bible, when it says that God did something, the Talmud says the memra did it, or the Aramaic translation said the memra did it. So the word of God is very different from what we think today. The word of God means something completely spiritual, something of the divine order that enters into the human being and motivates us to one thing or another. That the word of God is a force of action. When it enters into you, it changes your consciousness, changes your being, and pushes you to one thing or the other. And the word of God, like the beautiful God in Aristotle, has an almost magnetic attraction. When you hear the true word of God, you are moved to action. Okay? So sometimes when you hear Christians talk about the word, what they mean is something that is supernatural, that is metaphysical, that human beings can actually inhabit, and that it moves other people to action. I remember when I went into a rabbinical school, I had my first out-of-town pulpit was in Boise, Idaho. And so I had a student pulpit. I flew up there once a month for a couple of years. So I ran into an old friend of mine from Compton, and he said, so what are you up to? And I said, rabbinical school, and I got through that part of explaining that, which was not easy, but I got through it. And so my friend says to me, so what do you do? I said, well, I fly up to Boise once a month to be a rabbinical student. And he looked at me and said, wow, they fly you up there? I said, yeah. He said, you must be very heavy in the word. I thought, wow, I wish that's why they brought me to Boise, like they were looking for someone heavy in the word and found me and flew me up to Boise. I think he saw me in a tent, in Boise, heavy in the word and bringing people back to God. It gave me a great sense of what I should be doing. Whatever else I was doing in Boise, that's what I should have been doing in Boise. But he had this sense of when you're heavy in the word, they'll fly you up to Boise, Idaho if you're heavy in the word, right? But that's what he said to me. He said, you must be very heavy in the word, okay? So that really helped me understand what we're talking about here. Now, all this preface to the Gospel of John, that the Logos became flesh, which means the Logos came down and inhabited a singular human being, and that singular human being, therefore, was like the great philosophers, who was the inspired character. The great philosophers, now it was concentrated into the soter. If you did what he said, you would be salved. The pain of existence would be healed of you. He was the embodiment of the law. So the idea that everything that I've talked about today, you might say the hope that it would just arrive. It's time. It's time for a black president. It's time for a woman president. It's time for the soter to get here, to bring salvation to us, to clear things up, so that history would, as it were, resolve itself, and we could go into the future healed. So what Tillich says is, there's a kairos, there's a time when people are waiting for this. And so he says that whether you a Christian or not, if you are a Christian, the idea of kairos is a Christian idea. Jesus didn't arrive just at any old time. Jesus arrived at the right time. Okay? Now, from an historical perspective, you could say this was an accumulation of forces that with all of this going on, including the part that I didn't talk about today, which is the Jewish background, that the Logos had become flesh and that the redemption of humanity was at hand. This is something in the Greco-Roman world, if you heard this, you would say not, oh, that's incredible. You would say, it's about time. We've been...
Shalom tova uveracha. sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, tova v'racha. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Sim, 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 shalom, sim, sim, sim.